In this episode, we are going to be looking at a clip from Pastor Doug Wilson, a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist. If you've been asking questions like, what is Christian nationalism? Should I be against Christian nationalism or for Christian nationalism? We are going to hear straight from the horse's mouth what it is and talk through whether or not, as Christians, we should support this movement. Okay, I may frame it just a little bit for you like this.
Okay.
Here is the problem with Christian nationalism as a name, as a title. It was created, that name was used first by its enemies.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, like, you could say, like, oh, Aristotelian ethics. And, like, if you want to know what that is, you go to Aristotle because he made it up.
Right.
Or Kantian ethics, and you go to Kant, and because he made it up. Or Christianity, and you go to the Bible because the Bible tells you what Christianity is.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody said what Christian nationalism was. The media just started saying, well, they're Christian nationalists. And all the Christians jumped in their chairs and went like, oh, I don't want to be that. No, and you just start pointing fingers at what.
And that's associated with
Well, that's
people
the thing.
who've used the name of Christ to...
Totally. Like, if you're a Christian and patriotic in any way, you're a Christian nationalist. And basically you just spook Christians and make them jump and like say, oh no, I'm not like those Christians.
Yeah.
So that you cuddle up to the world.
So I do want to push back on this because you said people who are called Christians go to the Bible, but Christian was also a slur word
Totally.
towards followers of Jesus.
Which is why
It was like from my understanding, it meant like little puppies. Like, oh, it's like a little puppy, like you believe you're a little Christ, like.
it was
right?
used against Christians,
Right.
which is part of why Doug Wilson, even though it was a term first used as a derogatory term, he has since embraced it.
Okay.
But with his own brand of what he says Christian nationalism is. But here's kind of the problem, is that because it was used first by its enemies, everybody, different groups who believe different things have said like, oh, I'm a Christian nationalist. So you've got anti-Semites who think like white is right.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, America belongs to the whites and I'm a Christian nationalist. You got people who like are doing 4th of July parades in their church and they're a Christian nationalist. And you've got people who don't even believe in God, but they believe in the West, and they're a Christian nationalist. And all these different people claiming that title because none of them made it up. It was made up first by their enemies. So,
Okay, so before we hop in fully to this video, I have one question for you.
please. Yeah.
Is Christians being involved in politics a consequential thing for our modern day Western society as we know it today, in your opinion?
I think that the statistic that I heard just earlier today was something like 46 million Christians did not vote in the last election, and the last election was decided by 46,000 votes. Scattered in different states, right, to win the Electoral College. But all told, basically the election could have swung with 46,000 votes. So I think that's 1%. If 1% of the Christians who did not vote had voted, I mean, obviously you have to have 1% of them all vote for one side. But, you know what I mean? If there was participation by Christians in our elections, it would be hugely consequential. So, yes. And I do think that Christians have an obligation to participate. This is the kind of government that God has given to us. And if Christians don't lead, you abdicate that leadership to the ungodly,
Right.
by necessity.
Right.
And so that's wrong.
All right, let's hop in.
We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and property. Without a societal recognition of life, liberty, and property, a healthy classical liberal order cannot exist, and life, liberty, and property are no rights at all unless they were granted us by our Creator.
For context on that quote, in this guns blazing against Christian nationalists, whoever they may be, a prominent media pundit, she made her own definition, and her definition was, if you believe that our rights enshrined in our Constitution come from God, you are a Christian nationalist.
Yeah, that's crazy.
When in the founding document,
Just include Abraham Lincoln in that.
It says, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. So the document says they come from God, but she said, if you believe they come from God, you're a Christian nationalist. That was his.
Yeah, it's just like, where do they come from? It's etched in stone on the Lincoln Memorial. The thing that, brought into like all the civil rights that we have today. This president to say, hey, we're going to put an end towards slavery. And he did it
for God's sake.
Yes, and he did it on the basis that every person is created with unalienable rights
by their Creator.
Yeah. A quick walkthrough.
So let us start at the base of the stairs and go up them one at a time. Every society, of necessity, must have a final locus of authority. That authority must either be contingent and within the system, or absolute and outside the system. If there is no absolute authority outside the system, then the contingent authority within the system has become functionally absolute. It is not and cannot be absolute, but it can try to act like it is. In short, if there is no absolute above the state, then the state becomes absolute. In blunter terms, if there is no God over the state, then the state has been made God. To acquiesce in this arrangement would be, to use the biblical term, idolatry. It therefore follows that it is our duty and responsibility to confess the true God as the sovereign over all human society and over every form of human society. All societies are moral agents and consequently make decisions that can be morally praised or condemned. All moral agents are answerable to the God who created them. It therefore follows that all societies have the responsibility to acknowledge the true God of heaven, because he is the one who will praise or condemn their actions at the last day. To postulate a false God is occupying that.
And without acknowledging the true God of heaven, your whole moral compass is going to be based on something else.
Whatever end the state decides is most advantageous to itself. That's going to be the basis of your moral compass.
And that's terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Especially with the evidence we're seeing today and all that. It's just like, I know for myself, I should not be my own moral agent. Like, I should not be, not my own moral agent. I shouldn't determine what morality is absolute for me.
Yeah.
Or anybody else.
But
on my own.
You have to have somebody who decides what that is. Somebody has to be all wise and all good to tell you what to do. But it's not only the same for individuals, it's the same for governments and states.
Yeah.
But if they will not acknowledge a lawgiver, they will be the law creators.
Yeah, I just know without the Bible and without my faith in Jesus, I would be evil. Like, I know it for a fact. And if I got in a position of power without that moral, without God being my standard, then I would do everything in my power to acquire as much stuff and power as I could.
Yeah.
That is just logical. It's not that hard to think that someone who does not believe in God or objective moral standards
shouldn't have that power.
Well, no. It's not a far-fetched to think that they wouldn't just act in their own self-interest all of the time.
Right.
That makes complete sense to me.
So far you're with him.
Yeah, so far.
Place outside the system is to be guilty of a more subtle form of idolatry, but it is still idolatry, a construct of human devising, not truly outside the system, but rather projected there by human contrivance. To make the principle obvious, let us stipulate a cargo cult somewhere that worships a Nike sneaker that washed up on their beach, treating the sneaker as an avatar of the transcendent sneaker. It is a long shot example, but stranger things have happened. The fact that it is projected into the realm of the transcendent does not keep it from being idolatry. This would be a quote-unquote transcendent idol, scare quotes included. Allah would be this sort of idol. Authorities within the system, assuming the prerogatives of deity, are immanent idols. The only authority over all human affairs that is truly outside the system would be the true and living God. All Christians, in order to be Christians, must confess this. All of this is self-evident, and yet many still draw back from openly acknowledging it. This is because of the next question, which will always be immediately posed. And truth be told, it is a good question. It is a most reasonable question. If there must be a God outside the system, lest the system itself become God by default, the natural question is then, which God? What is his name? This is where many political thinkers, otherwise clear-headed, flinch. the answer has to be the true God, but to answer that way will result in them being called a Christian nationalist. When they flinch like this, they believe they are pulling back from the prospect of horrendous religious wars and interminable conflict. They are actually setting the stage for such wars and conflicts, because that is what every form of pacifism necessarily does. Appeasement does buy time, but then it makes up for that in blood later on. If we reply, as we should, the true and living God, the follow-up question is immediate. And which one is that? Who is the true and living God? Does he have a name? Lest I keep you in suspense, the answer is the Christian God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Father of the Lord Jesus Christ. Jehovah, he is the Lord. In a society made up of Christians, this would have to be our choice, of necessity, and it would exclude, also of necessity, Allah, Shiva the Destroyer, Molech, Mammon, and regulators from the EPA. But because we have been taught not to exclude anyone from anything lest we hurt feelings, this creates a different kind of pressure. This is the pressure to opt for a lowest common denominator God, a placeholder God, a God whose attributes are best described as an extended and etiolated tapioca pudding kept at an appropriate storage temperature in the celestial cooler. This is the God now invoked on American coins, and over the last 75 years, he has shown us just how impotent he really is. He governs nothing, he reveals nothing, he rules nothing, and he judges nothing. In fact, he appears to have abdicated his position altogether and has delegated any remaining ceremonial duties to that big marble statue of Zeus Sedit in the Lincoln Memorial. This scratch and sniff God of the current iteration of classical liberalism couldn't save sinners who were trapped in a wet paper bag, much less from the fires of hell. But back before our activist judges and our cot queen church history professors.
Okay, I see why this guy takes heat. He just says it how it is, but that's like his whole point, right?
Yeah.
Is like you can buy time in a sense of, hey, like we're not going to tell you not to worship your God, or that's not a part of, and like the Pope recently did or whatever, all paths universalism leads to salvation or heaven, or I don't know, it's all subjective, just like I just imagine word, like I've seen those graphics where the words are just like tangled together. But his point is ultimately that line of thinking leads to moral subjectivity within a society who claims to be Christian and followers of Jesus, which is the actual moral foundations of what made our society in the West, specifically the United States, so awesome.
Yep.
And we've said, nah, that doesn't matter. And ultimately, it's leading to more death and destruction because of like the passivity on the role of the church of saying, well, people out there can do that.
Yeah.
And we're going to worship Jesus in here. And as long as you bring people into the church, that other stuff doesn't matter. And it's like, well, watch our society crumble to bits one step at a time because we've chosen to, relent or give up the authority that God has given us to, take dominion over the land.
Yeah. I will say that this kind of stuff, like usually I'm pretty clear-headed. Usually I'm like, I can just track with an argument.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of stuff that is very compelling to me, where it's just airtight.
Right.
And it doesn't take a lot of thinking. It doesn't take a lot of hoops. It doesn't take a lot of mental gymnastics. It just takes grit and courage to say exactly what he said is like, God has to rule over the state. Sure.
Yeah.
Which God? The Christian God.
Yeah.
And just to say it, like the God that we are going to serve in this country is this God and not the other ones.
Well, and you look at, the apostles, and then you even go back to kings like King David. Warriors had grit, made mistakes, but, when you look at the early church that died on behalf of their beliefs, one in particular being boiled in oil.
Yeah.
And then you look at some of us, including myself and perhaps yourself, in our modern day Cush, churches and AC'd environments and all that stuff. And it's incentivized to be the nice guy who kind of stays out of arguments online and stays out of, don't mention any, real consequential political beliefs or anything like that. Stay away from that.
Don't mess up Thanksgiving dinner. Just be nice.
Yeah. And, I see where people are coming from with that, but ultimately, similarly to other conversations we've had, there's a slippery slope that just keeps ticking away.
Yeah, the devil is going to fight.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful quote. I don't know if it originated with C.S. Lewis, but I know C.S. Lewis said it, where he said, if you would like peace, you must prepare for war.
Yeah. Why did it end up being virtuous? I understand being gentle and kind and that being a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
But why was that interpreted to be you being soft as a man in the church as the thing that's gentle and kind, not standing up for your local community, not going out and because I don't know. Yeah.
I think the lie that the church bought, we took it on the baited hook, was that you have to appeal to the world to win them, to pull them in.
The attractional model or
yes,
whatever. Okay.
You must be attractive. And Jesus was attractive, and that's why his message was so compelling. He healed people, and he loved people, and he made people laugh. And he was a wonderful guy to be around. He was very attractive, but he was also a hard, tough as nails guy. And he did not waver from his singular message, the kingdom of heaven has come.
Which is wild because, at the same time, after he gathered, presumably one of his largest crowds that he's ever had, he was willing to let them all walk away and offend every single one of them by saying, you must eat of my flesh and drink of my blood.
When it came to the very end of the day, he was willing to turn everybody away.
Yeah.
To stand firm, absolutely, with a spine like a, steel rod, for his message, for the truth and conviction and purity of his message. And that, I think, the church made that trade, I think. I don't know when, sometime in the last couple decades, but the church exchanged that. She exchanged the purity of the message for attraction. And I know that we conceded that ground bit by bit, church by church, service by service, year by year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we have come to a point now where exactly what he's talking about, like you traded it, you thought you would gain time, or you thought you would gain a couple of converts.
And you paid in blood.
You paid in blood. Like we're paying with our kids' blood.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to say one last thing before we jump back in. It's this hard line to do right, because it's not all the way. You see these really hardened men, and a lot of times what pushed us in that direction is people experiencing their fathers and people really hardened and one-track mind and not open to new ideas and all this stuff. And then, but I think where we're at today is we went way too far away. The reactionary pendulum effect that happens, that we see from, Armenian to Calvinist. You got, Pentecostal to Baptist, like cessation, gifts of the Spirit to cessationists, or God's inside of time, outside of time, and all of these things where most of the time there's this middle line,
right,
where that's actually where the truth lies. But it seems like right now we're in a really consequential place where potentially, because of the way that we've said this is loving, it will take away the ability to freely worship and freely walk with God for people to come. And so that's this like interesting place we live in, where it's like, like we can be super nice and super inclusive and super whatever you want to say all we want, but are you just going to sit back and slowly let the church be chipped away and our society be chipped away?
Yeah, you lost the war of attrition.
Yeah.
Started memory holding everything. The God of classical liberalism really was the true God, the God of a robust Christian consensus. but that was a long time ago now, a century or more. The current classical liberal order has a god shelf, and every porcelain deity figurine on it is an idol contained within the temple of Mammon, the one who actually collects all the tithes. The older Christian consensus had a shelf also, but it was not a God shelf. It was a lawful political order shelf, and one of the most beautiful objects there was the classical liberal order, the way it used to be. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and property. Without a societal recognition of life, liberty, and property, a healthy classical liberal order cannot exist, and life, liberty, and property are no rights at all unless they were granted us by our Creator. But under Darwin, there is no Creator. Under secularism, there is no creator. Under atheistic materialism, there is no creator. There are therefore no rights. And when sinful men see that such a denial of our creator and maker has been established in the assumptions of the populace, the first thought that occurs to them is job opening. And when the state assumes this role, functioning as an immanent idol, they see no need to endow anybody with anything. They do dispense privileges, and they do offer bribes to their favorites, but rights? Never. These observations are all obvious enough that they must either be refuted, embraced, or suppressed. Professing Christians who are nervous about Christian nationalism will see their options begin to narrow. They cannot refute these observations, or at least to date have shown no inclination to try. They cannot embrace them, for that will cause them emotional distress, a thing not to be borne. This will leave one option remaining, which is that of joining with the persecutors and declaring the newly minted state church to be the one faithful representative of the way of the Master. The more epistemologically self-conscious our unbelieving society becomes, the more they act out their foundational principles, and the more clear and evident these observations will become. To any Christian who is thinking clearly and biblically, the surrounding cultural apostasy will make it plain that these observations cannot be refuted, and no one is trying to, and that the persecutors must therefore try to suppress them, which is what they are doing. The only honest Christian alternative, therefore, will be to embrace them.
All the hubbub about what is Christian nationalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not really a brand or a movement or a particular idea. And it has very, very little to do with
So you're saying it's like a tool to suppress.
Right, but even what I'm saying is true, like what he is advocating for has nothing at all to do with America. It is not American or patriotic specifically for America. It is just recognizing Jesus is the King of Kings, and is our king, is our government, is our state going to recognize him as the ultimate authority or not?
And that's what any society must do for rights to exist, for law and order to exist, for people to be able to own property.
Exactly.
To be noble at all. Like the thing that I thought is like, we all absolutely are indebted to those men who fought in World War I, World War II, and I don't know about these proxy wars these days, but I know there's a real gratitude to people who laid down their lives. You know, it's in our anthem, you know.
And because they believed that those rights were real.
Yeah. Because
they believed that those rights were absolute, given to us by an absolute creator. But you can't fight for a government that's going to rip the rug out from under you when you look at it sideways. Like, that's 1984.
Yeah.
And that's how everybody else lives without God. Everybody forever, for all of time, has lived that way.
I mean, that's the whole thing about these, like, really leftist leaning people is like, you know, and it's like with us, we've spent a lot of time in other countries and other places ministering there. Countries where secularism is ruling, countries where Islam is ruling, countries where Buddhism is ruling, whatever you want to fill in the blank, the post-Soviet nations, all of these places. And you pop someone in there that hates America for just few months, they'll want to come back so fast. And you know, it's every
Except
time.
Japan's a nice place.
That's true. But in some sense, it's nicer to visit than it is to
You're right.
be from Japan.
Well, and I'll agree with you in the sense that to be Japanese, you are not free.
Right.
You are trapped, like societally, culturally, by by the pressure that's around. I mean, it is. Their rate of self deletion is enough to tell you
Yeah.
how high that pressure is. That it's not
Yeah.
fun to be Japanese.
Yeah, and I love how he mentioned that these things are self-evident. We see it all around us. And it's like, you can keep denying the God of the Bible all you want, and you'll keep continuing to see death and destruction come upon. You can continue to be a coward and not stand up for what you believe in and not vote for what you believe in. And you will continue to see any sense of rights be taken from you one step at a time.
Well, and more to his point, I think more precisely what he's saying is, if you will not do it, godless people will do it.
Right.
They will see the vacuum that you created, and they will seize it, and they have.
Job opening,
and they have.
Yeah. We're there.
So Christians must like stand up. So I think for my part, would I say that I am a Christian nationalist as such? No, because I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
You know, but do I believe that America, the American government, and every king should and will one day bow the knee to Jesus? Yes.
I just think we really, because, you know, I've thought about this quite a bit since getting married and having my own family. And I think we talk a big game when we're like, well, I don't care about the U.S. I'm a citizen of heaven, you know? And there is a truth to it, right? We cannot, like, we have to be separated from this thing called the U.S. If it collapses, that's not where our hope is. Our hope is in the return of the Lord to come and usher in the age to come and establish his kingdom on earth, to get rid of sickness, to get rid of. But I'm thankful for the foundations that my granddad set for me in a place like Texas, where you can own property, you can establish foundations for your children and your children's children.
Yeah,
for
you
them
can
to
use
be
deadly force to get people off your property.
Yeah.
Welcome to Texas.
Welcome to Texas, man. And, you know, I don't want, you know, as much as I am okay with being martyred, right? Like, for the sake of the Lord. And we think that a lot. And it's like, well, I'm just going to stay in my church. You know, I'm not going to go out and share with people. I'm not going to go out and get involved in the local community. And it's like, yeah, you don't actually believe that. You want your society to be safe. You want your neighborhoods to be safe. You want your kids to be able to go to schools and be safe. You
Totally.
know? Like,
I mean, like, well, I think kind of the issue that you're getting to, and it's the same red hot button that he was touching, which is, you want, even Charles Dawkins or whatever, like that famous line that just blew everybody's mind, where he goes like, yeah, I wish my nation was still Christian. Like, I wish basically that I got to enjoy the fruits of a Christian nation. Everyone wants to enjoy the fruits of a Christian nation. That's why everybody wants to come here, because everybody wants to enjoy the fruits of a Christian nation. But if as a Christian you say, I don't want to put forth any effort to make it that way or keep it that way, like, you're crazy. Just straight up.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to put forth any effort to make it that way or keep it that way, you're crazy.
we've been spoiled for all intents and
And
purposes.
if you don't have the courage to stand up and say, I want it that way. Yes, I want it to be Christian and not anything else. I want it to be Christian. If you don't have the courage to say that, you will lose it. You will lose the fruit that you wanted.
You know, he mentioned one of the idols being Allah or Islam, and man, just look around.
Well, look in the UK, yeah.
There's, and look here. There's mosque popping up all over. So
Is that how we're going to end this?
I'm just saying, like, let's wake up a little bit. Let's,
What I'm saying, yeah, I think it's so compelling, and I think that he's right. And the only barrier to really proclaiming, what's that thing from Psalm 2? Like, the Lord said, I have installed my Messiah on Zion. So kiss the Son Like, be warned, you kings, kiss the Son, lest ye be angry.
Yeah.
The only thing stopping you from saying that and staring Caesar in the face and saying, no, Jesus is Lord, is courage.
Okay, let's end here. How do we practically implement this into our lives? Not just say, well, we need to get a grip on this, but like, where does the divide happen from, hey, I want to share the gospel with my neighbor of the truth of Jesus, and like serving your local community, getting involved in your local government, voting in elections? Like, where does that divide happen? Because sometimes I think it's foggy for people.
I don't know. I don't see a divide.
Okay.
I just think
it's been communicated that way to me, I guess, where it's like,
totally.
Why don't you just focus on preaching the gospel or sharing the gospel or doing a Bible study?
But I think that is the gospel. There's like the gospel to me, there's the gospel to my neighbor, there's the gospel to my church community, and there's the gospel to my nation. In the way that John the Baptist told Herod, you can't be doing that with your brother's sister. Like, the gospel goes to everyone. And the gospel to my neighbor is Jesus can save you from your sins. And the gospel to my church is like, Jesus is creating a body, the kingdom here on earth out of us. And the gospel to my nation is, be wise, O kings, kiss the Son. And the gospel works its way at every level, and the message is functionally the same. But
I think that you're hitting the nail on the head there, which I think we have in the West particularly. We said, hey, this box, which is the church doors, that's where Christianity happens.
That's where you can have God, and you can be saved and do all that nice stuff.
And we haven't done a great job at informing people as teachers of the gospel message that as a judge, you can do the work of the gospel and minister to people. As an attorney, you can do and ought to do.
As a teacher, as a doctor, as a...
Well, and especially, in all these categories. But the reason I brought up the people in the legal system is because the foundations are quite literally Mosaic law.
Yeah.
When you trace it back.
Yeah.
And so, yes, but like you said, doctors, teachers, that these are the battlegrounds for the church and for Christianity, not the church walls. The battlegrounds is our places that we serve in on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it's not just up to the pastor and the preacher, but it's up to everybody walking out the gospel through their work, through their occupation, through their daily lives, and in their local communities in a way that really affects everything around them for goodness, not just seeing people get converted, which is important, but also seeing godliness affect real life around you.
Yeah. Well, we'll just pray this as a closer. The Lord's Prayer. May your name be kept holy, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And if we mean those words, if we really mean them, love for God becomes real and manifests itself in the world. So, Lord, would your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven? Would we be able to see it, not just in our hearts, not just spiritually, but in our schools, in our hospitals, in our governments, in our churches, in our HOA meetings? Lord, would your kingdom come and would your will be done? Amen.
Amen.